Hello! Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of shadows. Have you ever noticed how your shadow changes throughout the day? In this video, we're going to explore why shadows change length and what they tell us about the movement of the sun. Stick around to see some cool experiments, observation, and learn some interesting science behind shadows. Before we get to know why shadows' length changes, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a shadow? A shadow is a dark area where light from a light source is blocked by an opaque object. When light hits an object, it can pass through it, so it creates a shadow on the opposite side of the light source. The size and the shape of the shadow depends on the angle and distance of the light source relative to the object. Now, let's see how this plays out with the sunlight and see how shadow changes throughout the day. But first, let me introduce to you Mr. Puppy. He will accompany us on observation of the shadow. So, let's start. When the sun is at its highest point in the sky, the light rays are coming down almost directly overhead. In my area, the sun is at its highest point at 12 p.m. At this time, shadows are at their shortest because the light is hitting object from a steep angle, minimizing the length of the shadow cast on the ground. Essentially, the higher the light source in the sky, the shorter the shadow it creates. After observing an hour, you might slightly notice that the shadow change. As time passes, the sun moves westward, which causes the shadow to lengthen. But after observing for another hour, you will likely notice the changes. If you compare the shadow when we start, you can see that the shadow at 2 p.m. is longer than the shadow at noon. This is because the sun continues to move lower in the sky, causing the shadow to lengthen. As the afternoon progresses, you'll observe the shadow growing even longer each hour. By 3 to 4 p.m., the shadow will be noticeably longer and will continue to extend as the sun descends toward the horizon. We also observe that the direction of the shadow also shifts, always pointing away from the sun. By late afternoon, around 5 p.m., the shadows become very long and stretch out, indicating that the sun is about to set. The lengthening of the shadow is due to the sun's increasingly shallow angle in the sky. Finally, as the sun sets, the shadow will become extremely long and eventually disappear as the sun dips below the horizon. This daily cycle of shadow length changing is a fascinating way to track the sun's movement and understand the relationship between the position of the sun and the shadow it casts. From this observation, we can conclude that the shadow's length depends on the sun's position in the sky. As the sun descends toward the horizon, we will notice that the shadow will become longer and longer and eventually disappear as the sun sets.